Okay, so to the next device. Okay, so yeah, I'm currently on a REPL IT, and of course this workspace. I'm sharing this workspace right now with Francis. Hopefully, in the Francis, yeah, Francis. Okay, so hopefully it would take off from there. I'm done with this. So I'm going to be covering the first section, of this of the ES6 topic, right? Yeah, so I'm going to kick off by talking about arrow functions compared to the regular functions, as you know. Then I will move on to talk about a couple of things about the left keyword, the back keyword, some of the modern, so we'll call it the modern keywords because I think the last update we had on JavaScript regarding some of these things was probably in 2009, right? So we're going to cover some of these things and see why they are kind of like a better way to write JavaScript. Yeah, okay. So let's look at this. Okay, so standard way of yeah. I hope Francis, I think maybe you should take off your cursor from this file. I'm going to create a separate file, and I would probably give this the name of arrow functions, right? So I'm going to call this file arrow function. So let's have different let's have different files. So arrow functions.js. Okay, so currently on arrow functions, I believe you can see my screen. I'm going to zoom in for those of you that cannot see my screen, and I hope this is clear enough. Okay, so yeah, back to this. So we're going to first showcase the regular JavaScript function. Okay, so let's just assume we have a particular function to add two numbers. I'm going to create that right now. So let's just say we have some value A, right? Value A and value B, right? Then we just say we return value A plus value B. Okay, so I think this is fine. So if we call sum of 10 plus 10, that's the expectation. So we're going to console. So let's say let's total equals this, and console dot. Of course, you can do this on one line, right? Yeah, just try to make sure everybody follow up with this. So if I run this, let's see what we get at the end of the day. Okay, so is this running? Return value A, value B. What are we getting here? Oh yeah, so I think this is actually going to run right here. So I would have import this item. Oh yeah, so because of the way REPL IT works, I've ought to import this particular file into index.js, which I think we can do. So let's go ahead and say okay, let's just proceed within this file, right? Let's just proceed within this file, index.js. Surprisingly, I never expected it to work. Never expected it to work this way, but I mean it's fine. So this is our regular JavaScript function. Of course, we can also assign this into a variable like this. We can say sum equals. Yeah, I think we can do this. We can take this off. And I think this is also valid, right? This is also valid. So let's go ahead and see what we also have here. If I change it to 20, also valid. Okay. Now, the idea of arrow function is it's actually kind of like easier to use or to read by so many people because it's kind of like pointing directly to the scope. Though they look similar, but the advantage is when you use the arrow function. The arrow function itself does not have what we call the this value of the on the arguments, right? So on the argument object. I think that is kind of like an advantage. It's kind of like a disadvantage, and I would say the reason why it's a disadvantage, sort of, is that you cannot use it as an event handler. So I'm going to also explain what that is. Shortly. So an example of an event handler for those of you that have used. For those of you that definitely, I believe you have seen something like this before, right? So you've seen something like this before, and maybe you're trying to use JavaScript to probably point on this particular item. So the ID, of course, username. You're trying to point on this item like this. I think I can drop the size again, right? Just hold on, please. Let's see if I can. Okay, so you're trying to use JavaScript to point on this item and add this event handler. So basically what an event handler is just a way to add like a trigger, right? It can be a click event, so it can be a click event saying that if this is clicked, it can be a key up. Key up is saying you press, key up. So it can be key up, key down. It can be when you press a specific key, when you release that key, right? So these are event handlers or also triggers that we're definitely going to cover as well. And the thing is, currently you see this event handler. We have like greeting.text content, which ideally this is not greeting, so this should be greeting, right? Okay, so we have like greeting.text object. It's like saying you're trying to alter the value of this item. Of course, using the query selector greeting, right? We're pointing to greeting right now, not username. So I would assume that maybe we'll have like a different div. So let me bring in a different div from here. This is greeting, and this should be like username, right? So we're saying we're adding this event handler to the username. When we type something, we should change the context of this particular value, probably adding a context here, and we're going to pick. We're going to add hello, to the value of this specific item. So if you currently, do this, because of the fact we're using the arrow function, definitely you're going to get an undefined error. Are you with yourself, Francis? Guys, sorry about that. Yeah, sorry about that. Okay, so that is something I think you really need to understand. That using the arrow function, definitely you won't be able to access when you call this dot value. You won't be able to access this dot value in here. Rather, using the regular function, just like this. This is the regular function, right? Event listener key up. Without the arrow function, then this will definitely work because you can definitely access the value. Okay, so that is just one. That is just like one way to use this. Another thing you also need to understand is when it comes to implementing object methods, right? When it comes to implementing object methods, I'm going to show you an example from here. I think someone is joining and leaving, so I'm going to mute my. Yeah, sorry, so you won't have to hear that sound anymore. So this is just an example. You need to understand that using this keyword. Is someone complaining? Okay, all right. I'm also taking a look at the chat. So if you have any question, I'm sure Francis will also respond to you from there. Okay, so another example is this. Remember, I'm going to come back to this function we have here. This is another example of this is a regular object, right? The only difference is this object has a bunch of methods, right? Now the thing with this particular function you see here is if we go ahead to return this value. Yeah, if we go ahead to return this value, what we are going to receive here is NaN. This is going to be our response. And now the major reason for this, is this is actually supposed to return 1. I mean, as expected, right? So we did next, and here we are doing we're calling this method, which is expected to increment the count item. And the thing is, the major reason for that, is let's see. Yeah, so the major reason for receiving the NaN value, of course, is because of this again. Yeah, so this is our arrow function. So remember, this is a method, right? And this can also be interpreted this way. Okay, yeah, I think this is also very valid. We can return this in here. Okay, so here we are using we're using the this keyword with the arrow function. And now the arrow function no longer has access to this specific value, not to talk of increasing the value. So this is going to give us an error, right? This is going to give us a non error, which is of course not a number. And this is going to work. So you need to understand that this keyword basically is kind of like doesn't work directly when you're using this arrow function. You're going to jump into a couple of errors, right? So you need to really understand that before you use it. I will also tell you some of the advantage, but now I'm just trying to cover what I think are some of the major the reason why you should not use the arrow function. There is what we call the prototype methods. I'm not going to jump into that explanation on working with prototype methods. But it's kind of like the previous way to assess some of these methods. So imagine you have a function. I'm just going to explain this. Imagine you have a function, and then you have this couple of code base here. You say counter.prototype.next. And the reason why we are trying to use this as an example, I think we're actually following like the previous implementation we had, where we had like next and count. The thing with this right now is you are definitely going to have a couple of bottlenecks trying to also work with this, because as you can see, we still have the arrow functions here. So this is not going to be able to assess the counter object and grab the next method, which is what we have in the previous example. So let's say we have the next in here. So let's say we decided to work with so this is what we did earlier. Am I making a mistake? Okay, making a mistake here. And this should be like okay. Right, okay, good. So this is also going to result to the same problem we're talking about. So we're going to also end up not being able to use this. So it's always better to understand that when you're using this arrow function, this keyword is definitely going to result to an error, right? So rather it's actually better to work with the basic the main pattern of assessing the functions when you're working, if you want to use the this keyword. Okay, so that is a couple of disadvantage. I mean, I would not really see it as a disadvantage though, because you can always switch back to the previous way of doing things. But rather I would say you need to know when and when not to use this. Okay, so an arrow function does not have its own this value, but instead the this value itself is kind of like enclosed around the base scope. So when I mean the base scope is, let's assume you have you use this at some point, you're definitely going to be assessing some other objects and not what you have within the context of the arrow function. And also you have to avoid using the arrow function, mostly for event handlers, because I mean, I have experienced this error like countless times. We always think we can assess probably the value of the text we have, or the value of the input field we have in our HTML, of course, by pointing it using the ID. But at the end of the day, because of that arrow function, we are not able to access some of those context values. So it's always better to go with the basic functions, right? The basic function or the basic object call. Okay, so let me jump into an example of using the arrow function, and how it makes your code sort of easier. So I think you'll use the arrow function most times if you're just trying to do basic operations. So for example, we have this function we created. We said let's total equals sum 10, 20, and so this whole function, right here, which is currently 3 lines, of course, makes us print the sum of 2 values. But we can also achieve this by doing something like this. So I'm going to change this to this is add, and we're going to just yeah. Okay, so if we have like add console dot add 20, so not common, no, but yeah, not common, 20. Yeah, okay. Okay, so you're trying to understand that using the arrow function, you can also use the return keyword here. This would work. This would definitely work. All we have to do is to wrap this inside the braces and the return. Yeah, so the major thing is it makes our look kind of like short, right? It makes it look short, and I would say it's also like a better way to kind of like showcase should I say JavaScript code expression, because there are so many things that we could actually have in one line, and we end up having it in multiple lines because we're not able to return things with such a easier fashion. So another example, imagine we're trying to sort some values. So imagine we're trying to sort a value. So I'm going to bring in another example. Trying to sort this array. This is what we would rather do sometimes. But using the arrow function, this can even look pretty much easier, right? So this is the second alternative of using this arrow function, and as you can see, we're able to achieve the same results. So instead of putting this, looking more like a callback, we can actually achieve this on a single line using the arrow function. So I would just say the arrow function makes it easier to perform some operations such as JavaScript mapping, reduce, filter, and some other keywords compared to using the regular function. So if you know about these things I just mentioned, which of course we're supposed to cover because they are more complex JavaScript syntax, if you know them, then you would also realize that yes, the arrow function is going to be of great help to you, right? Yeah, so I think basically that is some of the major reasons why I think you are definitely going to be using the arrow function. Okay, so let's also see if we can let's see if we can if I can show you a couple of other examples. Yeah, so I think we have another example here. So this is an example trying to append a color to a specific item. So this is set color, a method. This is to maybe like your HTML object, so you can easily reuse this function for that. But the thing is, using arrow functions as well. I think it's called using the objects literal. You can have this as an alternative to also implement this to also implement this whole item you're seeing here. So let's on this file. So you can use this to also implement, what this of code you have is drastically, reduced. So I would really advise that. I mean, this is great. Arrow functions are great, but you should really, put in enough time to study it and then know when to use it. Okay, so I would have loved to also explain or talk about when to use this when working with classes, which is something I think maybe I'll just give just one example, then we can move on. So I have an example here working with a class. So you have a simple a simple function. This is a function rather. So you have a simple function. This is kind of like the old way to implement objects. So just so you know, before classes came out, classes also came out, as part of year 6. But this is kind of like the old way to implement objects, which we refer to as classes as well. So we have like the car class here, or the car object, right? And the car object has this method with this property. So by default, you see we have this.speed equals 0, and here we said that this.speed equals function speed. This.speed equals speed. So we're just trying to do a little bit of object orientation here, and you see that if you return this value, definitely you're going to arrive at what you see here, 50. Also, there's an easier way to also implement this, and not having to do this kind of operation, right? So I think the object, the arrow function just ends up making your code look a little bit clean. So as you can see, we have set timer for speed rather than putting in like the function call. We're able to abstract the whole function call into this, right? Sometimes I think, especially, we should know your team, know the people you're working with, and know when to do some things that might seem a little bit awkward to them. JavaScript can be very awkward, depending on your current level of understanding some of the syntax. I mean, it's great, but at the same time, you have to be careful, especially when you're working on projects or large projects with other people. So I think that is it for arrow functions. So that's it for arrow functions. I think I would probably just talk about working with let and var and what I think is the difference. Also, we have a couple of other items such as using the spread operator, working with template literals. We've been using a lot of template literals. Probably we should start with template literals. So basically, when you're working with strings in JavaScript, we will tend to have something like this. So so I'm wondering why this is. Okay. So let's assume this is a username, right? Put a value of John, and we have let's say let's account, or let's just say address equals Lagos. So of course you see using like two different type of codes. Doesn't matter, but I'm just going to change that. Okay, so as John, which is the username, so I can call it like this. I can say lives in address. What you call this depends on how you choose to use it. So this is very valid. This is 100% valid in JavaScript. This might just look a little bit confusing at times. Of course, The other option we have in year 6 is to use the templating. And I don't know, but I feel, of course, most of these new implementations is as a result of brainstorming and looking at other languages, seeing the way they do things. For example, in Python, you can definitely do string concatenation or manipulation, probably in about 7 different ways with 7 different syntax. JavaScript also have a couple of ways to do this. The next option here is string. The substitution method using the template literal, which I feel is very great because by using the template literal, which is basically on your keyboard, probably most times the key you have before the number 1, if you're using the keyboard. So you see that with the backtick, we can also put in our string. We can do this. We can say username lives in address. So, but the thing here is we have to make this more like a variable substitute by wrapping it inside the braces, and so this is valid. So you see that we are doing this right inside the string. So I can also do the same thing here. Yeah. So the reason why it's wonderful is because with this now we can do things like passing a more structured string value that would also append variables inside things like your email messages. You can easily send a whole bunch of string and it automatically do all the concatenation and all the substitution inside that string and append the right values like the username, address, maybe like email, and it will give you like a well-structured email at the end of the day. You can use this. I've seen a lot of use cases, for emails, but there are also a couple of use cases for logging, like creating logs in your code. You can easily point and say, okay, a user tried to access a particular route, and you can attach the route to the message, and the route return like a specific HTTP error, maybe like 404, like 400. Or maybe like 500, so you can append this inside the literal as well. Now imagine trying to achieve this with a normal string. You're going to have a bunch of plus everywhere, trying to make sure you remember where to put a good level of spacing, else you will have strings that are like coupled together like this. So the string literal is actually very great. The template literal is actually very wonderful for a lot of use cases when it comes to string manipulation. And you need to also understand that this is, of course, from the ES6 standards, which is also regarded to the ECMAScript 6, right? The ECMAScript, just so you know, is kind of like this foundation that is in charge of placing the standards for a couple of scripting languages. I don't think it's just JavaScript. I think they also place the standards for a couple of other scripts, like coffee scripts. You can check that out, after the call. You can definitely check that out. So we also we'll talk about the let keyword and also the var keyword, how it differs, right? We would also talk about the const keyword. So let's assume we have the var. I've explained this before. Username. What is the major difference between? So we have John Doe and use the let. Okay, keyword is actually going to reduce the amount of errors you have or the amount of bugs that you probably create. I was discussing with someone today, and he asked me, okay, so as a programmer, how can you define what you do to a company? And I told him, as a programmer, what we do most of the times is we create bugs, right? So it's very valid to say I'm a programmer and I create bugs. It's also valid to say I'm a programmer, I build clean software. So I mean, they are both valid because at the end of the day, if you create bugs, which you will definitely come across or you definitely do, I think it's sort of almost saying that is part of what you do. But let's continue with this. So we have the var keyword. Using the var keyword, you'll see that you can actually create this multiple times, and JavaScript would not determine this to be an error, rather assign the value you have here, which is assign the new value. For example, I can change this to Mary Doe. So let's use Mary Doe. Yeah, and this is good JavaScript. Like, I mean, this is bad JavaScript, sorry, but to JavaScript, this is acceptable, which is kind of like the problem we're talking about here. So you have to really know when to use the let keyword. I don't think it's a good advice now working with the var keyword. Though I think it depends on what you're implementing and how you choose to use it. It's also valid, but I think it's better you just try to stay on the safe path and use the let keyword. This is one of the problems. Another problem about the, and I hope you can hear me. I hope everyone can hear me. So another problem, let me see the charts. Okay, good. So another problem about using this. Another problem about using this is I think I'm going to have to explain this with a code as well. Okay, so I have to also explain this as well. Let's see. One minute, please. Let me bring up a very good example. I explained it in one of our classes, talking about scope, right? But I think it's better if I explain this the idea of scope with let's see, with an example. Okay, so a quick example here. So I said this is definitely going to work. So try to make sure you avoid this, because imagine you have this in two different areas where you don't really notice you've created something with the same variable name before. It automatically overrides the value there, which will definitely probably. But using this is definitely going to give you an error. So if you come here and say let username equals John Doe, you're definitely going to have an error, right? Because you already used and this is let, not met. So you are definitely going to have an error because you already created this. Okay, so a very good example here. We have a for loop. And in this for loop, you discover that, and ideally, the var keyword is supposed to, the variable declaration here is supposed to be within this day. You discover that printing this outside will also give you another value. If we run this, you see what we get. We'll see 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We said I less than 5, and I less than 5. Ideally, if this is commented, we're supposed to get 0 to 4. But yeah, so this is outside the loop, right? And you see we still have access to I. Definitely this is going to, I mean, you can decide to call it a certain variable somewhere, not knowing that you're still referring to this guy, to this for loop, right? So the best way to do this is using the let keyword, because when you use the let keyword here, it's going to really point that out and tell you that it cannot access that specific value. So I is not defined. So you're trying to use this outside, and of course, and you can't use it outside the scope. And I hope you understand this. So this is the error you get telling you it's a reference error, and the I is not defined. So you actually experience most of these kind of errors if you even use like the if statements, you use like your for loop. At the end of the day, you are definitely going to experience kind of like a buggy. It's not a bug. I think it's just the implementation in the language. But let is kind of like the new normal, and you would always be advised to work with let, even based on the standards of JavaScript itself. So learn to remember. I mean, working with let is more preferable. I personally do not use var in most of my projects. I can't even remember using var except I do that by mistake. But when I spot that, I always want to convert it to let. I don't know why it's kind of. I think the major reason why they can't just deprecate var, like all of a sudden and remove it from the language standards is because it's practically impossible. We have like bunch of projects already written with JavaScript using the var keyword, so it also has to be accepted, right? But you will always be advised to use the let keyword. Okay. So imagine we have something like this. I'm going to show you the var keyword is actually added to the global object as a property, which means, and when we say the global object most times, of course, refer to window or this. So we have like global object here. So now we're using the var keyword. So I'm going to run this to see if this works here in Regularity. Yeah, so of course it doesn't work, right? We get this value, though it's not defined, and yeah, so that's because of the environment. So if you're on your browser, window would, if you're working with like HTML, within the browser and JavaScript, window will be referring to the context of the browser. Just like when you use the document model as well. So window will definitely refer to the context of what you're doing, but using window here, of course, is not going to work. You can try it later, but so imagine you run
We can't
this.
hear your voice. We can't hear the sound.
Zero,
So please
but when you do
take
this
that.
using the let keyword, it's going to tell you undefined because it does not add counter to the global scope, right? So this is going to give you undefined. Yeah, so I've explained about the idea of you being able to redeclare variables using var, and it can't be redeclared using let. So you should of course go with let for less for error-free applications. Yeah, so I think these are some of the like the foundational knowledge of working with var and let, and why you should go with var. Yeah, we also have the const, right? So which is basically used for creating constant values, and something you can't change, or you should not change. So imagine you're working and you have like key or maybe like DB, and you put in maybe some kind of Postgres connection, or so. I mean, let's not go with Postgres. Let's just talk about like a key, maybe like an email key. This is a front-end session. So maybe you have like a key, like a value like this, referring to the key. At the end of the day, mistakenly alter this DB, you're definitely gonna have an error because it's a constant, and you should not alter the value of constants. So if I run this, let's wait. See, so you see assignment to constants is also right. So you can use constants to create constant variables, things that you don't expect to change. Yeah, so there are some other things you should also understand, such as working with default function parameters, working with spread operator, using the for of loop to iterate. These are part of like the new ways of declaring writing JavaScript. I'm going to share this with you. I won't be able to explain all, but I'm going to share this with you. So at least we know we have been able to. Yeah, I'm going to share this with you because we are going to be doing some things regarding using ES6. There's nothing wrong with like working with the previous standards. Of course, you just need to understand that this is kind of like the new normal, and it's better to work with this because most developers are also going to be working with these standards, right? So using the spread operator, I think I'll just go ahead and explain what the spread operator actually means. The spread operator is basically used to spread out elements of objects, such as you have an array, you have a map, you have a set. You can easily spread things out by either combining things together or cloning items. So imagine if we have an array, right? So I'm going to copy this in here just to show you what I mean. So you have this, and you're trying to add items. So now we're trying to combine this set of items. We have 2, 4, 6, and we have to spread this value. And you need to, and this is saying, okay, copy the entire item we have here in here, right? So we're going to copy the entire item. So at the end of the day, if you print, you're going to have 246, 135, in one place, right? The same thing when you say you have hello, let's say hello and the array one. So I'm going to say array one. Let's use ARR1. equals, you have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we should come back here. Equals, you have like the spread here, 1, 2, 3, and you have ARR1. Okay, so what happens here is you're actually creating like a new array, spreading the content of this in here. So if we go ahead and log array2 there. So take up this first example and I run this. So you see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're also able to like spread the content of this item in. Yeah, so basically that's what spreading means. I also think yeah, using the spread operator, we can also use this like when working with functions. Kind of like a bit not so complex. You'll definitely understand it, but you can use the spread operator to do maybe like kind of like trying to compare the value you have between two arrays, right? At the end of the day, it's more like trying to pick up a couple of items and append it or spread it across another variable or another container. You can also use it when working with arrays like push method. So, for example, you're trying to push an item to a new set of array. You can actually push like a complete spread of data or items. Maybe you have like this set of items. You can do array2. So just imagine you have something like this. You can actually do array2 dot push, right? You're trying to push an item in here, and you can actually push the spread of array1. So I'm very sure this should also give us the same value. Let's go ahead and test this and see what we have. So on our console, yeah, of course, still works. You see, we can also push this similar to what we did earlier, right? The previous one, we just we had to spread it during initialization, but this we first initialize this and spread it after the initialization. So you can use the spread operators when trying to basically constructing a new array literal, or probably concatenating arrays, also copying arrays, right? So everything boils down to kind of like using the array and string options, right? And yeah, I think that is it for the spread operator. So it's basically used most times for concatenation or appending data in an easier fashion. You don't need to do the for loop for I in array, so you start counting every single item and pushing them one after the other. Yeah. So I think under the hood, the same thing is probably happening, but it's just an easier way for developers to approach some of these things. And I also think it's kind of like beneficial to developers more because you no longer you need to worry yourself with some of the hurdles when trying to create loops. Especially when trying to create loops. So it's a good thing, and at the same time it's also like problematic because new developers now find it difficult to work with the old-fashioned loops. But the thing is, when you try to use some other languages later, so like a couple of languages later in the future, you definitely have to come back to the old way of doing some of these things because you might not find the spread operator in there. But it's good to know that you have it here and this is how it works, and it's kind of like an advantage on your end. Okay, so I think that is it. Francis, can I give you the remaining 10 minutes to just talk about what you have? Probably 10 to 15 minutes, and we'll just end the session. Francis, are you there?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Hi, Francis. Do we still have Francis on the call?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Okay, so personally, I can't hear you, but I can see you're speaking. So can any other person hear Francis?
Can anyone hear me? Okay. They say they can hear me.
Oh, okay. Wow. Okay, so that is surprisingly I can't hear Francis. Okay, Francis, I think you can. Yeah. So Francis, you can reduce the background noise from your end and probably share your screen, so we can just do the switch very fast. Okay. Can you share your screen, Francis?
All right, let me share my screen.
Yeah, Francis, I think you have to be fast because we are currently streaming. So to avoid having too much delay, please go ahead and share your screen.
Okay, can you guys see my screen now?
All right. So I think you guys can switch from my screen to Francis' screen. I can't hear Francis. And I did not reduce my volume. Apologies if it's low. Okay, Francis, you can continue, please.
Okay. All right. So, just want to say one or two things about the structuring. Okay. I've just finished up with these arrays. So, I just want to talk more about the structuring, like getting the items of an array. Okay. Now, moving from what he just worked on from. So, like this array one now, we have five items in it. Okay, let me just have like a function. Let's say get items. This returns. We'll have it return. Let's see. Okay, let's say returns an array of let's say 49, 30, 5. This is a function to get these particular items here now. So obviously, if you want to get this now, let's say we'll probably have something like this. Let's just call it some items equals to get items. Probably okay. Let me comment this out. If we run this now, so log. So definitely this is what we are going to get. We'll get this, but there's a better way. ES6 with ES6 you can actually get these things individually. Let's say probably you want to get the individual items here. So what you can do is this: you destructure them individually. Let's say we'll have 4 items here. Let's say we'll call it A, B, C, and the D. So we'll now pass it to this. Get items. From here now you can console log individual of them. So you can do something like this. Console log B, which is so when you run this now.
Yeah. So, sorry, Francis. I feel your screen is not showing yet. A couple of guys cannot see your screen. Is it possible that you disconnect the stream and share again?
Okay, let me disconnect the screen. So what about now? Can you guys see my screen? Okay. So from here now, we can see that we can actually get the individual items from these particular items. So we are trying to get the second item here, which is just item D. So when you console log this, you see that you get just that particular item, which is item B, which is 30 from the console here. We can see that. So we can also log this. Let's say we want to get the last item, which is the console.log item D. So when you run this, you get, of course, you are going to get the last item, which is 5. So what the structuring actually does is that it helps you get the individual items here. Okay, let's take for instance, maybe you are trying to get a data, maybe you from an API, maybe this is an API call that you made. So all you are interested in is just the first, second items. You don't need these two items. So what you do is just for you to like destructure your items. Maybe you destructure it this way. So now from here now, what you see that you get is just the two items instead of getting the whole array, the whole object in the array. So when you run this now, you find out that what you get is just the two items, which obviously that's what you actually need in the array object. So that's what the structuring does. So without this destructuring, you just have to like console log everything and you start using maybe for loop to loop through them and get whatever you want. So this destructuring also works with objects, not just for arrays as well. So okay, let me just quickly show you how it works for objects. Okay, let's say we have an object, maybe okay, let's say an object Francis. So we have a first name, book, then let's see last name, Francis. So just the same way you will use the structuring for this. So if you want to get the first name, so what you likely do is just let's say first name, then equals to Francis dot first name. So but with the structuring, okay, let's console log, you can see console.log. So when you run this up, you get say okay. Okay. Yeah. I get where the error is coming from. So you see where the error is coming from. I was actually supposed to use a column here, so I use a equal to, which is assignment operator. So most times when you are running your code, so okay, I'm getting undefined here. So Francis dot first name. Okay, this first name. So yeah.
Yeah. Francis, I don't think we can still hear you, but I feel the problem was coming from the spelling of the first name. Can you guys hear Francis? Is it just me? Yeah. Francis, we can't hear you. Okay. So I think he has corrected the mistake, but we can't hear him, and I don't think he can hear. He can hear us. Francis, quite interesting. Okay. Let's see. Okay. So yeah, that I think he's back. Francis, are you there?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. I just reconnected.
it's okay.
So
It's
let
okay.
me.
Yeah, actually, we've actually run out of time already, and maybe you should just round up with this that you're doing. Then we can continue from the next session. I think that's fine,
Okay,
right?
okay. Yeah. Okay. Let me. So, hope you guys can hear me.
Yeah, we can. We can hear you.
So, I just want to explain something here. When you are destructuring your objects, when you are destructuring your objects, you can give the variable any name of your choice. It's not necessarily maybe you have to give, okay, like this. Let me take for instance, this Francis. Then we'll have the first name here and we'll have the last name. So in here now you see that I have a name and I have a last name. So it's not necessarily that you just give it that particular name there. So also you can have your destructure in there. There's another way you can also destructure this thing. You can have your first name, which is what is there, and the last name, and equal to Francis. Of course, this is another way you can just destructure your object. That's when you don't want to use this let keyword. So always make sure that the property names here is what you have. Otherwise, it will give you error. To give you error. So from this now, see, this is another way of destructuring it when you don't want to use the let keyword. So I think because of time, I think I'll just round up this place. So if you have any question, you can drop your question on the channels. So we are definitely going to answer your questions.
All right. So I understand today's session is short, but I think it's better so that you guys can spend enough time to go through whatever you've learned before sleeping off. We are definitely going to be having the workshop sessions to break down some of these other things we're talking about here. So it's just going to be like an hour in the afternoon, an hour in the evening, and of course I expect that most of you have complained. Most of you have complained already that you won't be able to join that session. So it's going to be recorded, and you will definitely have access to the content of that workshop session. If you can join, it's better you join because it's going to be like a lot more practical when you join. So you can also practice alongside with the instructor. So that's all for now, and we'll definitely drop a couple of resources again, and see you in the next class. Thank you very much for joining. Have a wonderful night. So the workshop is coming up every day. You have a session in the evening. Every day, just follow your timetable. That same day, there will be a workshop by 12 p.m. that same day, right? So we're supposed to have one today, but of course, I explained why we did not have one today. But in the next class, that should be like, I think 2 days' time. So in the next class, 3 days' time. So in the next class, we'll definitely have a workshop. Okay, so thank you and bye for now.